Hi, everybody. Welcome to Inside Scoop with Sue. And today I am here with Dr. Michael Pratts, a psychiatrist and medical director of children's behavioral health at Cayuga. Is that how you pronounce it? Cayuga County Community Mental Health Center and founder of Global Health Psychiatry. You've also co-authored 2 books, Mind Matters, a resource guide to psychiatry for Black communities, and How Amari Learned to Love School Again. So thanks for making time here to talk to us. We're really excited to have this conversation. And, we're all kind of trying to figure this out right now. So if you could, let's start with, what are the pronounced mental health changes you've seen with teens and COVID?
Well, Susan, first of all, thank you for having me. And we're really excited. Actually, our 3rd book was just published, probably within the last maybe 3 or 4 months. It's called Breeze's Journey to Joy. It's a story about depression and grief. It's quite timely. We actually talk a little bit about COVID. These children's books are really meant to be sort of bedtime stories, but in the back, they're serious questions for parents and guidance for parents and answers to the more serious questions. So it's actually kind of interesting series.
Can you repeat the name of the last book?
The last book is called Breeze, Breeze apostrophe S, Journey to Joy. And again, these are all going to be a series of kids' books, and they're meant to be a transition to start the discussion. These are really, really tough things to talk about and can be kind of heavy and academically laden and a lot of complex words, when in fact, all of us really, really need to have more appropriate and simpler language. To sort of talk
Perfect.
about.
We love that. That's our goal. We want to make it accessible. Hi, Dee. Dee says hello. We're happy to have you here, Dee. And anybody who has questions along the way, put them in the comments, and we will do our best to get to them. Okay, so let's move into, we just quasi finished a very traumatic period. So what are you seeing in your practice are the significant mental health changes with teens?
Yeah, a couple of things we were really super surprised about. One was the categories of children and how we ranked them and assessed them as far as how they were doing. Really sort of did the 3-card Monty with us. And so the group of maybe kids who had social issues and grades were suffering and maybe were getting picked on and things like that, almost uniformly, that group of kids did better. Those grades increased. That was really surprising to me. And as I talked to those kids, it was that they had more academic abilities than social abilities, and they suffered socially, which had a negative impact on them academically. And that was just surprising to see that uniformly across that group of folks. Then on the opposite end of the spectrum, the kids that, they were okay academically, but they were the emotional superstars, the real super popular kids. Those kids actually did worse. Those kids did the worst throughout the pandemic when they lost that platform by which they used to shine, and we measured how well they were doing. And then the kids in the middle kind of stayed in the middle. So I would even say the take-home point is that probably 20 or 30% of older kids could probably just do remote learning if they were correctly identified. And then there's going to be another group, about 30% of kids or so, who actually really, really need to be 30, 40%. They really need to be in school for the socialization and other things like that. Since the pandemic, we're seeing this restructuring again, going back with the challenges of reintegration, reestablishing friendships, and social distances. I think people have been impacted, particularly younger people, less in context. For us, it's sort of this blip in time, but for them, it's their life. And so people being potentially infective, I think, is probably going to have longer lasting consequences in their personality and in their behaviors. My son, who's 10 years old, doesn't like restaurants with lots of people, period. I don't know if that's going to change or not. He just really sees it. Oh, you can get COVID in there. And they just see things differently. So I think it really has had a significant change.
You had mentioned something when I spoke with you before about optimism.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that I am really, really optimistic about the future because it's hard to really know what we are capable of if we haven't shown and proved that. And so I think, kind of as humans, what I have witnessed personally in my friend group, in my social groups, is a new realization of a new normal and what's acceptable and what's not going to be acceptable. Like even using my son again with distance and hand washing and all of that, I think is actually an improvement. And I think we talked yesterday too about sort of off on a tangent, the Me Too movement and how when that came up as an issue, there was a shift in how we appreciated that for those of us who didn't have really clear firsthand knowledge about that. And it's changed the way that I even raise my kids. So I used to, tell my kids at Christmas time and other times, give a weird Uncle Adam a hug or, sit in his lap and stuff like that. We don't do that anymore. And I really believe that children should have a choice about their, physical space. And so it makes me optimistic when I think about the kids sort of bouncing back from what we would call a tragedy. I think for them it's a challenge and just part of their life.
And so, how do we respond to this as parents? Because our kids may be changing in ways that we aren't also changing. And
Right.
it might feel like I want the old way back, like I was good at that parenting
Yeah,
beforehand. So,
that's
what do
always the case.
so
Yeah,
how do,
and
how do
and
we,
they're yep, and according to the parents, the kids' music is garbage, right? And you had to walk to school uphill both ways, and all of the things that we hold on to, as we sit with our geriatric counterparts and watch, I don't know, uh, Rod Stewart or whoever, and everyone else is looking at us like a bunch of old people. I think what it requires is the realization that you're not raising a 2.0 version of yourself. You're actually raising another generation of people who have to be able to operate within a new set of rules. And so if you're going to spend a lot of time trying to, teach them about dial-up telephones and how things were when you were a kid, you're actually I think impairing them in some ways. We really need to be teaching them about how to navigate, post COVID, how people are been tolerating the stress, how folks are tolerating reintegration, and what it means to move on from old friends sort of to new friends. So I would encourage all parents to abandon the idea of what you did as a child and how that these kids nowadays have it easy or whatever, but rather try to look and see how would you negotiate and navigate on a phone your personal position in the pecking order when you have bullies online making pictures of you and other things. The way you dealt with that as a child in a lot of ways isn't applicable, and we need to get back to the principles that hasn't changed. And so what I would encourage parents to do is really think about the value system that you want your kids to have. So being honest and telling the truth, right? Standing up for what's right, and silence, is complicit. And being kind to others and things like that. That's always going to be true.
well, what do you think? You mentioned like not looking back to the way we were raised, which is always hard to do because that is who we've incorporated into ourselves. But now we have a new time in our lives where nobody's experienced this before. And we shouldn't go backwards to before COVID because things have changed. But we don't know what we're doing now.
Right.
Like, what are the new set of rules? And Try Hard Mommy asks that in the comments. What are the new sets of rules that we should be using to parent our kids?
Yeah, the new set of rule is number one, you're probably more freaked out than everybody else, right? Parents universally, when I see them, are much more worried than usually the child. And sometimes that's for good reasons, lack of perspective and other things like that. But in general, I think recognizing our own stress and the kind of tone that we have in our house, whether you have a spouse or a partner, Are you guys arguing more? Are there more financial problems? Did you lose your life? Did you lose somebody, and how you are handling that as an image for your child? But what I would say is, as I look at my kid, my young kids now, 10 and 12, we just dropped off my daughter, just restarted 7th grade after being out for a year and a half. And just trying to get a sense from her how she felt going back into the building, where she felt secure, where she felt insecure, and really playing a more supportive role. So I would say, number one, don't freak out. Number two, sit back, try to read the tea leaves. And the other thing is this, and I don't know how you guys are going to feel about this, but I'm a firm believer in snooping, and I don't believe in privacy. So whatever your personal opinion is, I go through my kids' stuff. I encourage you to go through their stuff when they're not looking. Don't let them know. Read their diaries. Do all that. Sorry.
Yeah.
Search. Oh, let me tell you this too. Look back at your children's search engine. Go back. Look back and see what they've been searching for. And if you see something you don't like, don't get mad. I had one dad. He saw like a porn picture or something. He took out a hammer and he smashed the computer. And I said, "Oh, you saw a porn picture. What else was there?" And he was like, "I don't know. I destroyed it." Well, thank you. I would have liked, go back and look. What is the kid looking at? Are they looking at, what is sexuality? I mean, that's different than, skinning dogs or something like that, right? So snooping and trying to find out, read the tea leaves, look at your kids' behavior, try to eavesdrop, try to look at their stuff to get a sense of where they are, and then try to help them with the skills to negotiate their position and not our position.
So that's not a position that we hear often, to snoop.
I know.
So I want to ask you about that, because
Yes.
let's say I find something there that really worries me, and I haven't been upfront with my kids
Correct.
to say that this is public domain and I have access to everything.
Right.
So now there's this whole trust betrayal. How do I go about addressing the issue if I can't acknowledge that I snooped?
Yep. And that's going to be really tricky. And I believe in trust, but I believe in verifying. I believe in trusting and snooping. So that's just my best advice. I can tell you, I advise all my parents this, and I have gotten significant feedback from folks going, "Oh my God, look at what I found." And yeah, that does provide a challenge, right? How you address, the fact that you look through, your partner's phone and you find out they're having an affair. Yeah, I guess that's going to be challenging how you breach that. But the fact that you found that out, I think, kind of trumps that. So how are you going to deal with that when with your child? You're going to have to not let them know. I wouldn't let them know that you're snooping behind them, because first of all, they'll cut that source off, and that source is invaluable to you. Way more valuable to you if they're looking up ways to hang themselves than the trust that you had because you looked in their book or their diary or something, or online. And that's where the content is, on their phones and in their search engines. But the fact now that you're aware of that does allow you at least to know what's going on. Oh my God, I looked in, my kids looking at transgender surgery sites for teenagers. Oh my God, they looked at 100 sites. They're doing their research over months. So they seem to be serious about this. How do you handle that? I actually don't have the answer for that. I'm sorry. I know people want me to have all the answers. But I will tell you, I guarantee you'll feel better knowing, oh my God, my kid's been looking at transgender surgery for the past 6 months and I had no idea about it. That should tell you something about yourself, and maybe you try to open up a line of communication, or maybe I'm not sure how you would breach that, but I definitely think it would give you more opportunities than you have in the dark.
Okay. So, your kids are young, on the young side of our audience.
I'm sorry, I have a 38-year-old, a 32-year-old, and a 30-year-old, and then remarried, and now I have a 10 and 12.
Okay, so more adolescent cred there.
Yeah,
but you also are dealing with parents who have kids in that demographic.
Yes.
And so does your advice change as kids get older? Like, your kid goes to college, are you still snooping? And
yes,
senior year, are you still snooping? Yes,
I am, and I would encourage you to as well. Not not in a perverted way, but in an oversight way, an information gathering way, and in a respectful way. If you can understand what I mean by that, I think it's 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 really and this is going to be tough, and I know this may be controversial, but if the person is not aware that you're snooping, I don't think that they necessarily feel violated. And if you come across something, if you come across drugs, if you come across needles, if you come across suicide notes, if you come across anything like that, unplanned pregnancies, you are going to be in a better position to be helpful as a parent than if you didn't know it. Now, how exactly you're going to breach that or cross that is super delicate, and I do realize that. However, I can tell you the content that some parents have found have saved people's lives, and to me, that's worth it. You
Yeah.
know, I had a kid find a parent find a gun that some other kid bullied this younger kid into holding for him. A gun in their house in the top drawer. So, oh, you know, you looked in the drawer. Make up. I put your socks in there. Make something up. Lie. Sorry. I know it's
Yeah.
not really
So
sexy. I was putting your drawer. I was putting your. You found the gun in there. You know, I went to put your laundry in there, and I found this gun. I mean, wouldn't say, "Oh, I'm snooping." You know, oh, I went to look up something online, and I Googled. I was looking for trans fats for my cholesterol, and the transgender came up. What's up with this? You can figure out a way how to make something up.
Okay, so when you said this might be controversial, I think it is controversial. But when you talk about loss of life, and I'm sure parents who lost a child would say, "I wish I had done that." So I can see both sides of this story, and certainly people are going to make their own decisions here. But
Yeah,
it's a fresh voice for us. I'll put it there.
there you
So
go. And I'm just one person. You know,
yeah,
I'm one
that's
person. That's
okay.
just my opinion.
Yeah, no, we want to hear from different people because it's going to
Yeah,
resonate for different people that are listening.
right.
I want to touch just a second on, this conversation is about reentry, but we have kids who I'm using my hands to show that not everybody's functioning at their highest level right now. So if you've got a kid who's you're looking at them and saying like they're suffering from depression and anxiety and I just don't, I mean, they're gaming all day and we can't break this cycle. So now as we're easing our way out of this quarantine situation, what can parents do to kind of like take charge and look at this as a fresh start with their kids?
Yeah, you know, and you see problems like this in post injury as well, right? A person breaks their leg or something like that, and then they're in the bed for a while. Then how do you get back to that level of activity? I think it's super important to do that. I can tell you, going from uh, being quarantined and not just lacking the social interactions, but all the YMCA closed, you know, the gyms closed, the Taekwondo, a lot of the options and outlets. But we have to really get back and think about it from a health standpoint, I guess. So, right, you want to be up, you want to get out of the bed in the morning for your mental health, you want to get fresh air, you want to be doing your activities. And what I try to do with electronics, since they are this much short of addictive, I mean, just in context, you guys know they spend billions of dollars just to get you to pick up this phone. Just every time you look at it, you know, the people are cheering because that's really their goal. So your child it's your child versus Facebook and Snapchat and Instagram and Google and the whole world against you putting the phone down. They want you to pick the phone up. So you're fighting an uphill battle. But I believe that you want to push that off till later. I find it much more difficult to get engaged in electronics first and early and then work out later. So my best advice to parents, use it as a reward. So you want to play Fortnite? Fine. Tomorrow morning when we get up and you take out the trash and do the litter or whatever, we're going to go for a walk. And when we come back and you do all that, then you can get on the game. So start to try to push that more to an afternoon or evening thing, and try to be introducing first thing in the morning, getting up and getting out of the bed. People spend so much time in the bed during COVID. Get up, make up that bed and leave that bedroom, go sit on the porch, get outside, do something. and get away from those electronics.
It's great advice. I just don't know how to make that happen. And
Yep.
it's like we've built these relationships that maybe are contentious now because all along we've been nagging in the teenagers' eyes. We've been nagging them to get out of bed. How do we reset now?
Yeah, and again, that's a super challenge, particularly with the older kids. The younger kids, you can not push them around, but you have physical. You can get out of the bed. You're not going to, get into it with a 16-year-old or something like that. So just trying to use influence. And again, I'm also not above bribing people. I guess that's also put that up number two.
Incentive.
Yeah. Okay. Incentivizing. There you go. So the other thing is, right? Nobody teaches the fire drill during the fire. So you want to try to have these conversations, not at the moment. So if you already know you have difficulty getting your kid off the electronics in the morning time isn't the time to have that conversation. That's a good advice for you. Do it later. So let's say it's dinner and you say, we've been having this issue every morning trying to get you off the electronics, and this is just not healthy. We got to do something that's going to give you 3 or 4 hours in the morning. Let's come up with some ideas. You give me some ideas. This is what I want. I want us to get up at 8 o'clock or 7 o'clock or whatever. And I want us to go for a walk and come back and do the kitty litter or whatever your chores are or whatever. Right? We kind of agree. How are we going to do that? What can we do? The night before. And if the kid's like, well, 8 o'clock's too early, I want to do it at 9 o'clock. Fine. Make a modification or something like that. Negotiate.
Yeah, I love that idea. That's great. Okay, so you might have a kid who actually needs intervention. It's nothing that, and maybe the parent also needs advice. But one of the things we hear a lot from parents is the scarcity of quality mental health care workers. So how do we navigate that situation? Like we're sitting on a time bomb, feeling like we've got to get some help.
Sure.
And everywhere we call, they're saying we have availability in 2 months, for example.
Yeah. So, just real quick, historically, psychiatry was, 2%, 4% of medical school graduates. And that has just a whole lot of stuff to do with treatments. And even up until, maybe 20, 25 years ago, there wasn't even reimbursement for mental health. It was a separate thing. Oh, you have health insurance. Oh, you don't have mental health insurance. That was a separate thing. And so we're sort of late in the game realizing that that's inseparable. People ask me, how much of it is genetic and how much of it environment? It's all of everything. You can't separate those things out. Right. And so because there's so few mental health providers, there have been a couple of things. One, I trust and would feel comfortable with a psychiatric nurse practitioner. I thought this was a real brilliant move, right? Looking at psychiatric nurses that have good history with treating psychiatric patients, and then giving them 2 to 3 more years on the doctorate level, learning about pharmacology. And these folks are great, particularly with, the bottom sort of 50% more routine things, And so it's really kind of put psychiatry now in a more tertiary field. So you have primary care, and then you have your psych nurse practitioners, and then they refer up. Online, believe it or not, I know we're talking anti-computer and anti-online, but online access right now makes psychiatry available throughout the country. So I work on Fridays for a company called Soho MD. They're in almost, I think, 8 states. 100 therapists, so you can really get access online. The other thing that you can do that I would recommend is you can do some screenings yourself. Internet access allows you, let's say you think, my daughter, I think she has anorexia. She's a teenager. And you look up, screening teenagers for anorexia, Center for Disease Control, American Academy of Pediatrics, whatever, will give you the screening tools that you can sit down with your kid and answer that and get a good sense of whether that's true or not. So I would actually recommend parents start with acceptable screening tools. You think your kid has ADHD? Look for screening tools from that age, go through and do the questions. And then if they test positive, then take the next step with pediatrics or whoever that is. And then you can get escalated up the field. So you don't have to start with me if you have a suspicion that your kid is depressed. You can start actually with yourself with screening, and then primary care. And if they need to refer you up, you can get referred up, or you can go right to the internet and and find somebody.
Okay, great advice. Here's the last question for today. What's the takeaway you want parents to walk away with saying, like, I'm so glad I met Dr. Pratts because he said?
Yeah, I guess I would say that this is uncharted territory. So parents always tell me they feel underprepared by comparison to other people. And I can tell you, me included, none of us has been here. This telehealth, we built this. Governor Cuomo said, just telepsychiatry, and we've been building this. So you're on the forefront, your children are on the forefront of what I actually think is probably an evolutionary step, here, a definitely step of growth, in our humanity. And so this is new for everyone. And so I think you can feel a little bit more comfortable about that. I think the second part is you should feel comfortable about exploring a little bit more, right? If your kid drives and you're riding with them and they're not, and they're out the car, something, look in the ashtray, just look around, be more conscious and aware. If you're not comfortable, quote unquote, snooping, just be aware. Do you notice your daughter's wearing long sleeves all the time and it's the summertime? You may want to look at her arms, right? Or things like big baggy clothes and they're hanging over and it's hot outside. Like, be more aware, because children are not always, a lot of times they're fearful and they need you to discover that thing. And you could possibly save your kid's life. And be comfortable that combining what your experience was when you were growing up and you made it through, that your kid's going to make it through, but they have different challenges. And you're trying to anticipate that and give them advice and then negotiate.
I love the last one. That's a great one, because most of us didn't grow up in environments where there was much negotiating
That's
going
right. You just said, I said so, and that's it.
Yeah, because I said so. And
Yeah.
that's, I think, one of the biggest gifts that this generation has is like us parenting with a way that brings them into the conversation. So that's a great note to end on. Dr. Michael Pratts, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. And we appreciate your advice.
Anytime.